Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue. Welcome online and in person to Concordia University's fourth space. Thank you so much for joining us for Creative Businesses and the Business of Creativity, Perspectives on Art-Driven Entrepreneurship. To help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from fourth space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui. And we make this acknowledgement to bring awareness and understanding of the history of Indigenous peoples and their territories we occupy. At Fourth Space, we work with our university community to mobilize and exchange knowledge by co-creating daily activities, conversations such as this one. So it's our pleasure to have collaborated with the National Bank Initiative in Entrepreneurship and Family Business at John Molson School of Business and the Faculty of Fine Arts to make this panel possible. Before passing it over officially for some words of welcome, I'll just let you know if you're joining us by Zoom, welcome. Thank you so much for being in that space. We will have time for a question period, so you're more than welcome to, at that point, join in with a raised hand and we'll call on you. Otherwise, we'll read out the chat if you like to put any comments or reflections in there. And if you're joining us in person, please let us know you'd like to speak again by raising a hand and we'll make sure to get a microphone to you during that time. It's now my pleasure to pass the floor to Deans Anne-Marie Croteau and Annie Gérin. Welcome.
Bonjour, I am Annie Gérin, Dean of Concordia's Faculty of Fine Arts.
Bonjour, and I'm Anne-Marie Croteau, the first woman Dean of the John Molson School of Business.
Thank you for joining us today for an honest conversation about the tensions, the challenges, and the potential for innovation in arts and entrepreneurship.
At the John Molson School of Business, we are on a mission to achieve our greatest potential for the betterment of business and society, but we can't do it alone. The unique opportunity offered to us today by Asan and Mark will allow us to explore all the factors that invite innovation in establishing a successful creative business.
Entrepreneurial mindset is increasingly important for creative practitioners in a modern economy. Before the pandemic, Statistics Canada estimated that the direct economic impact of culture industries, including visual arts, performing arts, literature and publishing, music, media arts, and screen-based industries, amounted to roughly $53.1 billion. And according to the Global Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the proportion of self-employed creatives is increasing globally due to a rise in contractual form of work, multiple job holding, and non-institutional support.
Canadian statistics show that 30 to 40% of women in creative industries are self-employed, compared to 15 to 20% in other industries. Combined with the statistic that Dean Gérin just shared, these numbers paint a picture of opportunity for sure, but also concern. Indeed, the reality for women in this area is that it's not that easy. Women get paid less, perform less hours, and have to combine several other jobs to finally earn a decent living. And we know artists and creative businesses took a hard hit during the pandemic. As we're turning a corner and adjusting to today's business realities, it's necessary that we have an informed narrative and open dialogue around the challenges creative businesses face, but also the potential for development in this area. Here we go.
The undeniable social contributions to intellectual, cultural, and artistic communities by our students and our alumni have led us here today to have this timely conversation on how we can help each other thrive using our collective expertise. So on behalf of both of our faculties, we thank you all for joining us and we wish you an insightful exchange. Thank you all. Merci.
Thank you, Annie and Anne-Marie, for your introductory remarks. And thank you all for being here, including those who are joining us virtually.
Thank you. My name is Ehsan Dayati. I'm Director of the National Bank Initiative in Entrepreneurship and Family Business at the John Molson School of Business.
And I'm Mark Weiser. I'm the supervisor of the Strategic Initiatives portfolio at the Faculty of Fine Arts here at Concordia.
We've been informally chatting for some time now about how our two faculties may build collaborative projects together.
At first, we had a bit of a hard time imagining it. After all, art and business are strange bedfellows. But recently, over a cup of coffee, we realized that maybe the logical place to start was exactly right there in the strangeness, at the confluence of the two fields, investigating, as Annie mentioned, the pushes and the pulls, the hidden commonalities, the challenges and the tensions that keep us coming back to the table.
Yeah, so we decided to start with this panel that we have today as a part of the exchange series of the National Bank Initiative and as the first collaborative event of such between our two faculties. And it has been a remarkably fun and exciting journey so far. I guess you keep it this way, I'm sure. To do this, we needed to enlist expertise. So we got to work and brought to you this panel of amazing panelists, the group of amazing panelists that we see here, who could speak to the multiple facets of these questions. And we're happy to offer this panel discussion today featuring Megan Bradley. Megan is the co-owner and director of the Bradley Artist Kiran. So I hope I'm right in pronouncing that, yeah. And Concordia Art History alumna. Diane Roberts, who is the founding artistic director of Arrival Legacy Project and interdisciplinary humanities PhD student at Concordia.
We also have Undine Hogebaum, who's joining us online. You see on the screen over there, who's the director and founder of Flourishing Startups, which she'll tell us about, and a program lead at Concordia's D3 incubator. And finally, Bridget Leblanc, there she is, Associate Vice President, Canada and International at the Creative Industries Group, National Bank of Canada. And finally, the panel is moderated by Dr. Adrienne McDonald, who's an Associate Professor and Canada Research Chair in Governance and Sustainability at the Department of Management at the John Molson School of Business. We are really quite proud to have such an impressive roster of women on our panel today. And it just so happens, as it was intimated before, that this is International Women's Rights Day. And so it's a happy confluence. And in fact, maybe not such a coincidence considering the subject matter, as we'll get into.
Yep, and it was all planned. So we would like to thank the National Bank for the support in the initiative and also especially Concordia Forces Space for their support and hosting us today. But with such a magnificent list of speakers, our real job is to get out of the way. And so without further ado, please welcome our panelists. Adrienne, the panel is yours. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon and coming to our event on art-driven entrepreneurship, where we're going to explore questions around what happens when we have business and creative processes converging and what the two worlds can actually learn from each other. So we had your introductions, but I think I want to give you each an opportunity to speak about a little bit more about yourself and your work in your own words. And then I would also like you to perhaps reflect a little bit on how your work and your experiences relate to the intersection of art and business. So we'll start with Diane.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Diane Roberts. I am the founding artistic director of the Arrivals Legacy Project. This is a project that has been in process for the past 20 years, and it actually started here at Concordia. I'll tell you the history in a second, but I want to say where we are in our organizational development. We're in the second year of being a nonprofit organization. So 2 years ago, we registered as a nonprofit organization, and that was out of necessity because we actually had received quite a large grant from the Digital Arts Strategy Fund at the Canada Council, and that prompted me as the sole proprietor at that time to say, I don't want that money coming through my account. So I'd always wanted to create an organization out of the Arrivals Legacy Project. So it gave me the opportunity to do that with that funding in place. So I brought an incredible board of directors together, one of which is in the room today, but it's a national board of directors. We've been operating now for, like I said, just coming up to 2 years. Should I tell a little bit about the history of the organization, or?
Sure, yeah, we have a few more seconds. Yeah,
okay,
go ahead.
Great.
Yeah.
So basically, the Arrivals Legacy process was a process that I developed. As I said, I was here at Concordia. I was teaching in the theater department, an introductory to acting course. And I wanted to create an exercise where I felt that the students would be on an equal playing ground, culturally, disciplinary. Some of the artists that were coming in to take that course were designers and theater studies students, technicians, as well as actors. So I created an exercise where I asked the students to embody an ancestor 2 or 3 generations away. And through that process, they really started to gain an understanding, a deeper understanding of themselves as artistic vehicles, but also as people. They started to connect to a river of experience in their own histories. So I started to develop this work, working with more artists across Canada, focusing mostly on racialized artists and Indigenous artists, looking at ways that we create based on our root cultural traditions. And so from that, the process developed over the past 20 years. And it was last year that we just decided that the process needs an organization to contain it.
Awesome, thank you. Actually, let's go to Undine online, switch it up a little bit.
Hi, everyone. I'm a bit gutted that I'm not there with you all in person. I'm down with a little bit of a throat thing this morning and want to keep everyone safe. So thanks for having me online. So I guess my story, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've started 7 social enterprises over the last 25 years in Botswana, South Africa, and now in Canada for the last 10 years. And my work has always been centered around this question: can business do good? Can business be good? And not just for some, but for all its people, for everyone it serves, our communities and our planet. And then I kind of transitioned in the last probably 8 years to asking the question, can business be more than good? Could it be a vehicle for regeneration and healing? And so even though I started all of these great businesses over kind of 25 years, I kept hearing this story that if I want to be taken seriously, especially in North America, I would need to kind of support all of my experience by having a strong business background. So I went and did an MBA, which was fun. But it was also a little bit shocking to me because I was pretty disappointed. Some of the content and underlying approaches to business were not matched up to my experiences in starting and running social impact businesses. There wasn't a lot of talk around sustainability and not a lot of understanding around the context of business. We exist in communities, in society, and on a planet. I know that when I did my MBA 10 years ago, a lot has changed since then, and it's very exciting to see some of the programming that we see in MBAs today. But during my MBA, I designed a method called the Flourishing Startup Method. And it forms a set of scaffolding, supporting and enabling the design of business models that we say are aligned to kind of flourishing goals. So flourishing is, I'll give you a couple of definitions. One is it's about loving ourselves, loving our land, and loving our people. And a business is thrivable when it enhances the integrity, beauty, regenerative capacity of the whole living community that it touches. And this is the center of my work at Flourishing Startups, as well as Balsam Impact by District 3 at Concordia. We're embedding this Flourishing Startup approach into programming. And how it connects to art? Well, firstly, art for me is an incredibly powerful vehicle for change stimulation. It's provocative, it's there to make us think. It enables us to witness and experience different perspectives, cultures, and most importantly, to question some of the paradigms that are perpetuating really harmful practices, oppressive systems, and inequality, both in our communities and certainly also through business. Secondly, there's artists. And in order to design flourishing aligned businesses, we've been doing a lot of work around what we believe is a new set of competencies for entrepreneurship to bring about these flourishing organizations. And voila, what do we have? These competencies are in fact incredibly aligned to the competencies that already exist in artists. Flourishing competencies include empathy, creativity, openness, iterative design, wholehearted engagement, feeling deeply, being engaged. Art speaks to cultural intelligence. Artists possess cultural intelligence. And honestly, I come from a business background. I think that our artist community have the potential to change our world for the better. We need them. And so my work is highly intersected with the artist community. And yeah, so happy to be part of this conversation, exploring all of this today.
Thank you so much, Ondine. Okay, Bridget, let's hear from you.
Hi, everybody. So I am the leader of the Creative Industries Group at the National Bank. So I found it very interesting when I spoke to Hassan, understanding the key question being, does it exist an intersection between arts and business? And I think that we embody, in a certain way, the intersection. Basically, the mandate that I have with my team is to support any banking, financial needs for creative companies. And just to be clear, because creativity and art has many definitions. We cover productions, we cover gaming, musicals, any types of artists, digital creativity. So basically, we have the opportunity on a daily basis to hear the projects, the dreams that all of these creators have, and translate it, if you will, within the bank's, I'd say, requirements, and support those companies. So we've been existing for 25 years. So obviously, this is certainly a sector that we believe in. Personally, I find that it has a really big impact. I'm very proud to be part of that team. And I guess I would keep it at that.
Great. All right. Last but not least, Megan.
I'm glad I got to go last. I got the shakiness out. So my name is Megan Bradley, and I'm the co-founder and co-owner of a gallery here in Montreal called Bradley Ertascaran. My business partner's name is Antoine Ertascaran, and we are a commercial enterprise. So we are a privately owned commercial space, but we work with contemporary artists who are doing extremely evocative, interesting contemporary artwork. So my job is to represent these people and to represent them in many different ways. So we accompany them throughout their career, and our relationships are long term. We really focus on long-term goals with our artists, and we look to get them into institutions and to have sort of international impact as much as possible, to really have as much visibility as possible. And then, of course, we also try to sell their artwork. And so we do that in different ways. We have a lot of individual clients who we've cultivated over time. Both myself and my business partner had galleries prior to opening our gallery, so we've really been doing this for a long time, and we both came to the table with a strong client base that we continue to develop. So we have individual clients, we have corporate clients, and we have institutional clients. So our job is to place artwork with these clients, but as I was saying, it's also really about representing our artists in other ways as well, and accompanying them through all sorts of different challenges, and supporting them if they want to do a major installation at a not-for-profit museum space. Maybe we contribute to helping them build that installation. There's all sorts of things that we do. We do a lot of outreach for our artists that isn't strictly based upon a sale. Again, as I say, it's like a very holistic approach to representation, and it's kind of akin perhaps to representing maybe like an actor. Maybe you have sort of all kinds of different things that you do that isn't about one specific immediate result. So it's a very privileged position that I'm in. It took me kind of I've been doing this for a long time in sort of different ways. And it's really kind of a dream come true, because I realized quite early on that this is what I wanted to do. And when I did try to kind of stray away from it, I was always sort of pulled back, because I love to accompany artists in their creativity. I am not a creative person. I am not a maker. And I have a tremendous respect for people who can make, because they make us think, they make us question things. So yes.
Great, thank you. That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so let's dive right in to the conversation part, where we start to explore the relationship between business, maybe with a focus on entrepreneurship and art. So how do you understand this relationship? And based on your own experiences, what do you see as the differences and some of the tensions? That's kind of the juicy stuff that I always like to get into, perceptions, and also the commonalities between these different worlds. So we'll start with Bridget. And we'll move through the panel.
Well, first, I think that there's a big element is a perception, and I think it's a false perception that if it's culture, if it's art, that it cannot be business. And I think that this perception has played in minds of a lot of people for too long. Fortunately, it's changing for the good. I don't see it in opposition at all, because if I compare it to any other type of business, whatever you're what I say, producing, if it's a show, if it's an art piece, if it's a TV show, whatever, the questions that you'll ask yourself will be the same as any other entrepreneur. The issue that we see too often is that the people that go in the arts track, or people that go on the business track, I'll start with the art track, tremendous talent, of course, and they learn their skills and so forth, but there's no business component. So when they get out of school and they go out into the world, they have again, tremendous capacities and skills and creativity, but they don't know what they don't know. So to, build a business out of it is always quite a challenge. And that's why, we come into play and we try to support and not just us, but, have them learn the tricks and trades. So it's not in opposition, if I go into the business side, there's a lack of creativity often, which is sad, because we've seen with the pandemic in our industry how resilient all of this sector was, and I really believe that a big portion of this resilience is based on their capacity to create, to find other ways of approaching an issue, a challenge. So to have those two, I guess, get closer would be beneficial on both sides. So, to answer the point on what's common, of course, in both situation, business and art, there's creativity. And as I was saying, on the business side, too often there's not enough creativity. We focus on, it's very rational, and we focus on numbers, and obviously it's not a winning combination always. But and I think right now it's, I would say in the last couple of years, from what I see throughout Canada, and I would say especially in Quebec, there's this awakeness with, I guess, people on the creative space, that there's a way to do business, to evolve, to create IP, and to have, I guess, Quebec and Canada just be and resonate on the international level. So, and not just the people, but a lot of organizations, Telefilm, SEDEC, CMF, the banks, are some of them are waking up as well. So I think there's definitely an evolution where there'll be, I guess, a conversion, art and business.
Awesome, thank you. Does any other panelists feel compelled? Otherwise, I'll just call on somebody. Well, yeah, sure, Megan.
I would just say something quickly about kind of the idea of like determination and believing in one's capacities and abilities to do something important. And I feel like there is kind of an intersection between business and innovation and artists and creativity, because you have to really, really, really believe in what you're doing, because often artists are working alone, and it's very challenging. You have to have a really strong composition, and you have to really kind of trust that you are doing something that is of value. And I think that business owners and entrepreneurs have to have that same trust, because they have to go out and get other people to believe in them too. So there is kind of an interesting crossover there. I will say that, to Bridget's point, it's so true that sometimes it's a shame that there aren't some more of the skills, or this kind of things you need to know that can be taught in creative industries, because that can really assist people. And I think that artists need to be able to focus on their work, and sometimes I think that's why they need people like me who can assist them with some of the other stuff. But they also would benefit from having some a little bit more coming out of the gate, some more knowledge in terms of some of the business stuff that can be really important.
Fabulous. Diane?
I'm coming from a very different perspective to both of you, in that I am an artist, and the business of arts is the part of my practice that is that needs the most help. That finding arts administrators that are willing to take the journey with artistic directors is a challenge, and has become more of a challenge, I'd say, over the course of the pandemic. There's also been a real shift in the culture around arts production and the value of arts since the pandemic. And it, in some ways, made our company, or my company, quite a bit more relevant, because of the skills and the competencies that you mentioned, some of the skills and competencies that exist through the natural production of creative practice that can be applied to business. Now, I find that there's a real tension in trying to understand the languages and how the languages can work together more. Because the language of business doesn't always sort of fit the language of arts production.
Great. And Ondine?
Finding that unmute button. Yeah, I had a really long think about this, and yeah, I have a response. We all know what business is. It's an entity engaged in commercial or industrial professional activities. That's kind of how we define a business. But how do we define art? The expression or application of human talent, creative skills, and imagination. So for me, of course, there's a tension that exists because these are not the same things, yet they are being weighed up against each other in actually quite a binary way. How can we compare apples with pears, a business which is an interconnected set of multiple activities, people, cross-functionalities, as an entity with one individual creative expression? Yet we do compare them strangely, and we also compare business folk and artists. When we compare business folks and artists, we also compare them through this dominant kind of capitalist lens, which views art and artists as often second rate to business. The successful businessman, the struggling artist, right? This is a narrative that we kind of carry. And I think these narratives are just plainly incorrect. We need to go back to this question around how do we define art and how do we place value on the skills, creativity, and contributions of individuals to communities and societies. The other thing that I think is really important is that art is incredibly broad. Like, think about the spectrum of all, everything from kind of like visual designers, performers, pottists, painters, sculptors, dancers, fashion designers, gaming designers, commercial writers, healers. I mean, this is kind of all encompassed in this definition of art. And Anne-Marie mentioned in our opening around the scale of the value of the creative economies globally. And this is significant. So I know many artists in business that are entrepreneurs, and they're in business because their art is kind of product-centered. They're adapting their products based on market needs. And so, of course, this becomes a business. And some artist businesses are really large, some of them are micro businesses, and some even contribute into informal sectors. And then there's the question, well, is commercial art art? Is this art? Well, yes, it is art. It's a form of art. So I think, you know, we really need to better understand the diversity of art so that we don't blanket all art and put them into a single box, because I don't think this is wise. There are emerging models and a lot more support that I've seen, certainly over the last 10 years, around how we support artists commercially in business. And Adrienne, it's this kind of merging of business and artist practitioners together that form a really incredible and dynamic opportunity for art to be commercialized. But we also need to support artists in the language, in the ways, and you know, this is what was just mentioned by Diane, that fit their creative process. This will make the transition of artists into a commercial space more equitable, inclusive. I know so many artists that suffer terribly from imposter syndrome in the business community. It's not very welcoming. But we also need to educate business folks in the value of the creative economies, in business models supporting art and commercializing art, so that they can see the potential and they can see themselves there. Because if we have more business folks and artists collaborating from a commercial perspective, I think we have, you know, an incredible opportunity to bring art commercially into the world. But I do want to mention the artists that are creating in the social and environmental justice movements. And I believe that this is a pretty big misfit between art and business. because how do you commercialize expression, social commentary, paradigm exposure, individual and collective stories? And this is the big question that artists have asked for many years. How do we monetize our artistic truth? Which is why we can't lump all artists into one category. Fundamentally, it comes down to the value that we put on these types of artists, because it's these types of artists that I believe are changing the narrative for the way that we can bring about new innovations and new ideas to solve some of our planet's biggest challenges. And here there is a very big and distinctive divide, because you can't commercialize this. And business is only interested in art that you can commercialize. And we need these artists that are supporting innovative new ideas. And so that's my big question. How do we support those artists so that they can join us in business, bring their minds, their creativity, the way that they see the world, to help us to imagine different things, different opportunities, so that business can be a source of good and aligned to flourishing outcomes. And that's my question.
Fantastic.
Sorry, that was a long ramble, but thanks for listening to that.
That was perfect. I loved every minute of it. Okay, so now we have a couple of questions that are directed at specific panelists, but of course, other panelists are welcome to add if they wish. So this question is directed at Bridget and Undine. So this question is around, is there a hybrid form of art-driven entrepreneurship that exists today, or that is waiting to come into existence? And how do current trends in both the art and business worlds dictate some of these developments? So I guess we'll start with Bridget, because we ended, we'll give Undine a minute to catch her breath and start with Bridget.
Well, that's a good question. And I was kind of in a bind to answer it, to be honest, because I wasn't sure what we actually mean by a hybrid. So my definition of hybrid is really just the evolution of art into the business world with the eyes that we have today. So as an example of evolution for a hybrid, so we have, I was talking to you about Ubisoft, how this gaming company, of course, I'm sure many of you know, has such a big impact in Quebec. So you've got this company that has tremendous employees, tremendous talent, and who are artists, various types of artists. And in the last few years, many of them have started up their own businesses. So for me, it would fall into this hybrid world of art and business, where you have people that initially were not businesswomen or men, that were pure artists, if you will, learned the ropes by working within a company, and then, thought, listen, I've got this great idea that I want to pursue on my own, and, I'll start my own business. So these new companies have emerged more and more in the last few years, and this is the case in the gaming space. We see this as well in the digital creativity space. So that's one thing. The second thing, the hybrid, the fact that right now, just with the technology, and COVID did bring some good out of the mess. We saw how we can reach people through, various platforms. So you have more and more now artists that use this tool to sell or to propulse the message, whatever they want to put out there, and worldwide. So that in itself generates, I guess, revenues or a business model that didn't exist just a few years back. So basically, hybrid, The other element of hybrid I see is in the digital creativity space, which I find amazing, is that you've got this crossroad of talents. So engineers, people that draw. So all these types of backgrounds that come together and create an installation that can travel worldwide. And so this is, again, very new because it barely existed about 10 years ago. So again, for me, this is kind of a hybrid element because it's really a mix of people that are very rational, that are very, like you would think maybe engineers, bringing and combining them with people that are there only purely to create. And they do businesses out of it. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And Undine?
So for me, the hybrid form of kind of creative-driven entrepreneurship is social entrepreneurship or impact-centered entrepreneurship. So I've seen over the years many artists starting impact-centered businesses and organizations because they're really attuned to the issues and challenges in the world. They can imagine, they deeply empathize with these big challenges that we face, and they want to act. And business is a vehicle for action. It's a vehicle for activism. So again, with my business background, I don't really believe that business folks are going to solve the world's biggest challenges. I believe that artists can offer alternatives to provoke us to look differently, to dream up futures that we can't even imagine, and offer opportunities for alternative perspectives. But artists also need business folks to implement and grow these ideas. And this is where business folks are so highly skilled. They can take these brilliant ideas and bring them into the world and grow these ideas. And of course, they're missing folks in this story and this narrative. We need the scientists, we need the humanitarians, we need the philosophers, healers, and many others as well. So we have a lot of evidence today that says interdisciplinary, intergenerational, and intercultural teams are the most innovative overall. And so for me, this is the future, and this is where artists can play a really significant role. I think both artists and business folks need to work on cultural intelligence competencies so that they can co-create democratized ways to work together that are free from dominant power dynamics, where artists have an equal seat at the table. And this is what will enable real innovation to transpire in our business communities. I don't believe artists, especially those that are working in social and environmental change and social commentary, I don't think they need more business skills. I think artists that are visioning and imagining new ways of doing things and solutions need to be partnered with business folks. But what these artists do need are new models to support their work. So maybe they're part of innovation teams, but there's also periods of time where business pays for them to go and create their art. So we need to think about new models to support the creatives that we need in business to support us with innovation. And I would love to see more business folks immerse in more creative activities. Bridget, you mentioned that earlier. I think that this would help us to begin to imagine more equitable, safe, and just business practices that will enable us to support new innovations. So lots of opportunity for synergy together. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Do any of our other panelists want to have anything that they want to add to that conversation? Perfect.
And I really understand, Ondine, what you're saying, because and I think there are twofold. So when we talk about artists, obviously there's a multitude of artists that don't necessarily want to manage their own business, that they want to do their skill, that they want to, be creative on whatever they're doing, and that's, perfect. That's their motivation. The ones that do want to build a business out of it, again, I think it's a question of mindset, because unfortunately, I think most of the world, should I say, think that because you're an artist, you will not have the necessarily skill set to be a business person. But that's not true, first. Second thing, this reality where you don't know what you don't know is the same with any other sector. So anybody else that does whatever, wants to sell a bottle or whatever, that has not done, an MBA course or a management, whatever, will not have, they're not going to be born with the skills because they're selling a bottle versus the artist that will be selling whatever. So I think that first people need, the artist, the creativity space need to stop thinking that it's a break, it's a mountain, then it's not, those two are not two realities that can be in the same space. Everything can be learned. So again, it's working with the right people. It's, yes, working in teams, collaborating. I believe that there's a lot of innovation when you bring different skill sets in different worlds. But really to stop thinking that because we're in the creative space that, too bad, we don't know business, we won't be able to manage a business. Because the steps that a new person in the world of business will have to climb are the same that any other person in any other sector will have to climb. So yeah, everything can be learned.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so this next question is directed primarily at Megan and Diane, although as always, other panelists can jump in. So as a person with roots in the art domain, how have business-related considerations affected your creative process and journey? And then what did you need to learn through that journey? So let's start with Diane.
It's interesting because I was reading a transcript of an interview I did. There was a book coming out on this very topic, business and the arts. And I was reading that interview and reading, rereading what I had said about some of the ways that I supported myself when I work as an independent artist. So sometimes we take jobs that need to sustain us because we're waiting for the next creative job that will sustain us. So I was thinking about, I went the temping route. Some artists do the restaurant route and some artists do the admin route. And I was thinking about some of the jobs that I had along the way that prepared me for running the company and running different companies that I've run throughout my career. And some of those deep administrative skills and some of the creativity that came with the skills that we brought to businesses. So in the temping world, the businesses or government organizations really wanted artists because we would put everything into, all the creativity into developing whatever it was, the documents that we had to do, and would often finish our work quite early. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about that in terms of the trajectory and where I land now. I think one of the things that we're really good at as artists and that we don't give ourselves credit for is this idea of partnership building and community building. So we have incredible skills at trying to bring the right people around us. And one of the things that I like about the nonprofit structure is that you get to work with whoever you want, really. You can work with lawyers, lawyers, administrators, with doctors, with people who have skills that they could bring to the table, but are inspired by the vision of the work. So it's the vision, it's the values that really take us to those deeper places. And I agree with you, Undine, that when it's a business that is basing itself on social enterprise, on how do we change the world, on the power of story to change lives, on this idea of community building, it sometimes feels incompatible to use the capitalist language. Yeah. So how do we then find a new language, a new way of creating spaces that are actually thriving spaces for artists and intercultural artists, spaces that businesses are dying for. And I see sometimes, some businesses borrow the language of artists by taking on, Mitsubishi wants to have a new way of, I don't know, I can't even think right now of the language that's being used, but there's a borrowing of language, but not necessarily an exchanging of the values.
Yeah.
So I think the future for me is in that collaborative space. Where can we collaborate, and how can we as artists think that consider ourselves not needing support? I need your support. We're put in this place of need rather than how can we actually work together to change the world?
Yeah. Wow, fantastic.
Okay, so maybe my creative process and journey, business-related considerations. Yes. So my journey was roundabout in a way because I studied art history and I did both my undergrad and my master's in art history. And doing that, I had absolutely no formal business training, and I recognized that I was really interested in business, but I was also really interested in the history of art, and particularly the history of contemporary art, because it was easy for me to kind of access and understand. That's usually considered like maybe 60s or 70s onward. So you could look at all these important political moments and look at them through art. And I always thought there was a way that art that becomes important or gets recognized in museums and in the history books, I mean, it gets there, somebody gets it there. So the artist gets it there, but there must be somebody else involved. So I kind of learned more and more about galleries and what, artist representatives can do. And I decided when I was 25 to open an art gallery, and I had no experience and no network and no money and no nothing. I went to Yes Montreal, which is an organization here that helps young people sort of learn how to write business plans. I worked at a restaurant and for 6 months and wrote a business plan in my off time, and then I got a bit of money. I opened a gallery, and then I just struggled for 3 years. It was such a struggle. I continued to work at the restaurant so that I could keep the gallery alive. And I eventually closed the door and went to go work for somebody else's gallery because I desperately wanted to keep working in galleries, and I just couldn't do it on my own anymore. But that experience, that part of my journey, was by far the most valuable experience. That failure, that for a long time, for me, it was a failure, was the most valuable experience. And I would never take it back. So it was like, it was incredibly tough, but it was that kind of energy that I had when I was young, and I was naive too, and I just did it, and I didn't know what I was doing. And so, and I remember Yes was great because they had some programs where we would have mentorship and stuff, but the distinctions that we're talking about today were very evident because the people who were offering mentorship were not at all aware of kind of some of the intricacy, like what it means to be an artist, how things might take longer. It's not about an immediate transaction. It was all that stuff that was definitely not part of the repertoire then. And there were almost, there were very few contemporary art galleries at the time. It was just, it was just a really interesting experience for me. So I was constantly kind of learning about how to be a business person and dealing with some of those things that we've been talking about too, where maybe you don't feel like you're in the right place, or you can't really talk about business because it's a gallery, and people sort of, a gallery is like, oh, it's just a gallery, but actually, galleries are multi-million-dollar businesses. And now that, 15 years later, I can see all of that, and I can see that I could have, sat up a little straighter sometimes in those conversations, because it was a legitimate thing to be doing. But it was an incredible learning experience. So I guess, yeah, no, it's a bit of a rambling response, but.
No, not at all. Super interesting. Do any of our other panelists want to add to that? Have any points that they want to add to that? No? Okay. So we have our concluding question now. So here at Concordia, we have John Molson School of Business and the Faculty of Fine Arts just across the road from each other. And in universities, we like to talk about breaking down silos and fostering interdisciplinary collaboration. So what might it take for an institution like this to bring about innovation and co-creation between these two faculties? I'm curious to sort of pick your brains about that. So let's start with Diane.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this question, I don't know if I have an answer to. I think maybe just sort of jumping off what I was saying about partnerships, that there's something about the building of partnerships and the building of value statements that is a really important skill to learn. And it's an embodied skill. It's not something that you can sort of work out on a piece of paper. I mean, you can, but there's something else. There's something else that comes deep from our bodies, from our souls. And so perhaps a way of creating a synergy between the faculties is to allow for or invite an embodied process of visioning. Mm-hmm. That would allow business students an opportunity to work with different parts of themselves that they may not in their normal life or in their normal school life be able to do. And then where the exchange can happen with fine arts, like the business courses that might cross over and give us a sense of, I keep coming back to this idea of story, how do we tell our story? How do we continue to retell our story? When you're in the granting system, you're always trying to reinvent and retell your story in a way that will fit this funder's criteria and such. And that can be a debilitating skill, but it also could be a really, really wonderful skill as you continue to churn and redevelop your ideas. So there's something, I think, in the synergy of story building, embodied processes, and value development that could be a synergistic. I don't know how to end that sentence, but opportunity, let's say.
Yeah. And I think for me, that kind of comes back to some of this conversation that you were having around language, right? And finding new language that is sort of on equal footing for both parties, right? So that we can sort of neutralize some of the power asymmetries potentially, and helping those different groups speak to each other from a new place of understanding. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, first, I think that today is the first step. I mean, I was excited understanding that this panel was happening. I mean, for me, it's about curiosity. It's taking the time for each, I'll say, faculty to, I guess, set up times, ways, activities to get to know one another, their realities, their challenges, their dreams, and to see out of those discussions if there's any junction. You know, I have a lot of friends, and myself personally, I would have loved to be a person, you know, own my own business. I had no ideas. So then I was I work at a bank. But if I had, you know, back then, if I had, because I'm a CPA, so if I had studied, you know, in my line of business, whatever, And I had the opportunity to meet creative people that had ideas but wanted to merge with me. We maybe could have started a business together, and put our strengths together. So I think there's a lot to be done there, but it really starts by having people that are curious and setting up times and activities for them to get to know one another. There's no, miracle to be done, but I think the solution is quite simple. It's just to structure it. And as I said, I think today is the first step.
Yeah.
To, I hope, others.
Yeah, because when you come with curiosity, you're asking questions rather than coming with the answers. And I think that does a lot to open up the dialogue between different groups. Great. Okay, let's see. We'll do Megan and then we'll end with Undine.
Sure. I just to echo both Diane and Bridget's points. I think, it's really the idea of having opportunities to listen to other people who are in sort of maybe very different faculties, but might have some points of intersection. And I just, in my own experience, I do remember quite vividly that when I was studying here, I was studying art history, and it was very much like you're in the classroom and you talk about art. And at the next building, or even sometimes in the next classrooms down, there were people who were making the art, and we didn't ever go and see them. And then when I stopped studying, I realized, you can go and do a studio visit and meet an artist and see what they're making in their studio. And I thought that was really funny, because it didn't happen in my time anyway here. And the same could be said of the business faculty and the fine arts faculty, that you could have the opportunity to go and visit a class or some sort. I'm sure there are so many ways to do it, and indeed this is one of them, that that the option is there if you're interested. So that's all I'll say.
Before you go to Undine, I just an idea popped into my head. I was remembering when we were recruiting for a project manager, I reached out to Linda to ask her if there were any students that might be interested. And when we were looking at the applications, we tended to veer towards the people that we kind of knew, not personally, but the kind of experience that we knew. So even though I wanted to, I was interested in seeing what graduating business students might bring to the table. There were skills that were missing, and that I felt were missing. And I'm thinking back now, wow, wouldn't it have been an interesting opportunity to bring somebody from that didn't have the exact skills in, and to find a way to sort of, I guess, build those skills. Yeah, mix it up a bit. Yeah, so it just dawned on me that this kind of risk-taking that we have to do in our businesses, in both the business and the arts, has to happen.
Fabulous, thank you. Okay, Undine, you have the last word.
Boy, that's a lot of pressure, but I totally agree with all of my fellow panelists. I think, creating equitable exchanges, I think, between the two is really important. There is this incredible architectural symbol actually in the building. There is a tunnel in the building that connects the business school to the Department of Fine Arts and Engineering. So imagine that this tunnel could be a conduit, an essential and sacred link between the vision of art and the action of business in addressing some really interesting challenges in our world. Imagine the kind of dynamic energy flowing through the two. There is an actual tunnel that links them. And I think this is really symbolic. I think it could be one of the most important links that we have in the institution. And so my question back to the hosts of this incredible panel discussion is, how are you going to ignite this tunnel so it becomes a foundation for innovation towards a flourishing future for us all?
Wow, that's a good thing. We now have our work cut out for us, I think. Perfect. I think that's, we're basically right on time. So will we go into Q&A? Does that work? Yeah, unless anybody has any concluding thoughts or comments that they'd like to share. Yeah. Okay. Alex.
As usual, so I have all kinds of crazy ideas that in this case, we need to answer.
Just getting a mic to you, just a second, please.
Well, I tend to have a lot of crazy ideas, and answering Undine's question, I think probably what's in order is the tunnel gallery. That could be an interesting option, and obviously that will require quite a lot of modifications to the way such a gallery can be run, but this could be an interesting idea. And of course, there are many ways you can actually make that lively and at the same time revenue generating place. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for this really amazing and thought-provoking thought. My mind was racing as you were speaking, and you know, the tunnel I think is a great site to start thinking about this, but the performing arts are already in the building. We are already infiltrating the business school. I really wanted to mention that. There's two things or two themes that really resonated with me. One of them is community, and you all talked about it in different ways in terms of language and translation and equal playing field. I think that that's really, really important. The other one is the question of language, and so not just how we speak to one another, but how we speak to ourselves, how we represent ourselves to ourselves. You know, it made me think about the fact that this entrepreneurship that we're talking about is, you know, it's obviously present in business, artists creating businesses or businesses working with artists, that's very clear. But the entrepreneurship skills are also present for artists who have practices that are not commercial or commerciable. I didn't say that right, but you know what I mean. I remember a conversation I had with the director of the Conseil des Arts de Montréal, Nathalie Maillet, who has a degree in business, but is also trained as a dancer. And she was saying that today, artists who are asking for grants from the various councils for the arts need to have entrepreneurial skills. They need to create a business plan. They need to have budgets. They need to have visibility and partnerships plans in order to get those grants now, because there is competition, and that's what's expected of people having independent careers. You know, I don't really know where I'm going with that, but I think it's really, it would be irresponsible of us not to have these conversations today. I think that's all I'm going to say right now. For me, it's a very important preoccupation.
Thanks so much, everyone, for your contributions to the discussion. I think one word that I sort of got stuck on a few times, not got stuck on, it stuck out to me, was the question of values. I think, Diane, you talked about borrowing language but not exchanging values. There were a number of other comments that related to values, and it got me thinking about value without an S. And how values and value are related. And whether maybe what we need to do is reevaluate the definition of the word value. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure who this is for, maybe a little bit for Bridget, because you're in the financial sector. We tend to talk about value, the value of a business or the value of an industry or a natural resource, and it's all about money. Is there another way to talk about value, to establish value? And can that be compatible with financial markets, with you know, investment thinking, growth, that kind of stuff?
I mean, value is in the eyes of the beholder, right? So everybody would have their own appreciation or value X, Y, Z. So at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that something has no value if there's no market for it. And sadly enough, but the world can be, very, very straight. So, so if you are looking to sell, to have a broad audience, yes, there needs to be value. Obviously, that it needs to be relevant. It needs to resonate to some people, to a lot of people, so you can generate a business model out of it. And that's often for newer business people, the first questions that we ask is, what's your business model? Like, who are you targeting? Who's your clientele? And again, so it doesn't mean that there's no value if the answer is that, well, I don't know, and maybe there's none. But sadly enough, in the business world, at the end of the day, if you want your business to thrive, you need to be profitable. So you need to obviously have people that do find value and are willing to pay for it. So
I'd really like to speak to the point of value because I think that there are, of course, different ways to evaluate value. And I think that this is something that I have struggled with for a long time in what I do, because we have the opportunity to work with artists who create things that are virtually unsellable sometimes. So, and we have decided to go down that road with them and value them. So we make those things happen with them sometimes. And it's a decision that we take together because we believe in the longer term or broader term value of what they're doing. And I think that the ways that business and art can intersect are actually quite important here, because we as a business can make the decision to do that because we know we've made other business decisions that will allow us to do that. And so everything is sort of calculated in such a way that, okay, we can do this at this time of year because we know we've got that thing happening at, this other time of year. And so it's like any other business decision. So you kind of offset, that you try and plan as much as possible, but that some things are just not going to bring in revenue, but you really want to do them because they help your business grow, because you become recognized as a business that's willing to take those risks. And you show your artists that you're willing to support them in their endeavors to do things that are more about the conversations that they can generate, the ideas that they can provoke, it's like about that longer term thing. So I think that there are really interesting intersections of like business and art collaborating together to make things happen that don't fall into the typical kind of understanding of what value is. And these are really interesting questions when we talk to people who are maybe helping us in our business side of things, because it's kind of really shocking to them. It's like, why on earth would you do this? This is 2 months of loss in a way, but it's part of, again, of that bigger picture. And I think luckily now, and through certain banking initiatives and even like BDC, they're more aware of these things now. So they also there is more of an understanding that, certain business models don't follow what you would typically think a business would be, but it's all part of kind of a larger plan. And, if you can prove that you're able to offset the loss and that you have proven track record of doing so, then you can kind of have the freedom to take those decisions and take those risks with people.
It got me thinking what you're saying. Kudos to do what you're doing. That's, it's personal, it's very good. So to translate it, I guess, in our world, again, yes, any company that needs banking services at one point needs to have a living business, but where we take the element of value and where because we're all passionate, even though we're not artists, we are all passionate of working with the clients that are themselves so passionate. So what happens is we do encounter, every once in a while, an entrepreneur that has a startup and doesn't have all the puzzles, the puzzle pieces, should I say. And because that person is so inspiring and believes so much in, what they have to offer, we're going to take a lot of time to hold a hand and really, help explain and try to support as best as we can so that person can actually at one point, actually live off and have a thriving business. So in a different way to how you're approaching it, but we do take in the value component and when we work on a day-to-day basis. And yeah.
I also want to jump in here. I think this is a great conversation. So in our work around flourishing business design, we are working with entrepreneurs not only to quantify within their business models as they're designing them financial value, but social, cultural, and environmental value and costs. And we're using approaches and tools that incorporate this into their business model design. And what we're even finding in some instances is that even if there is, for example, a really great financial value, the social, cultural, and environmental value of that business model is not high enough for the entrepreneur to want to invest moving forward. And so I think this is really important to expand our thinking around how we value things. And there is a movement out in business today that is starting to enable us to measure different kinds of value. The B Corp movement, there's Reporting 3.0, there's the Future Fit benchmark, folks. So there are a lot of initiatives that are expanding this perception of value outside of just financial value creation into social, cultural, and environmental value creation. And I think that this movement is going to continue to grow, and building these competencies is really important. What we find with artists is as soon as we can start quantifying things outside of just financial value, I mean, it just resonates so much with them. So this is really important work for all of us to be doing.
So I'm sort of curious as a student here, just like where those actual intersection spaces are in the Montreal community and this greater area. It's like it's a wild ecosystem to navigate, sort of this like business and art. So where are those intersections, and what organizations and people in the community are good resources for people to seek out?
There are incubators that specifically work in our space. So La Piscine is one of them, and Zoo is another one. Those incubators are specifically designed for creative businesses that have, various needs, either learn business aspects, marketing aspects, even build their business plans. So those are two really excellent incubators in our world. Besides that, obviously there's us at the bank. I mean, I have a team of 10 account managers that work in the ecosystem on a daily basis. So, depending on specifics, we can introduce you to specific people that can answer those needs. And then there's all these government entities. So you talked about BDC. This is a new initiative that's coming, that has come out. So now it's the execution period. We'll see how that goes, and we're going to be working with them. There's SODEC, obviously, CMF, Telefilm, and yeah, so just to name a few. So there is support out there for sure.
I would say also that any theater company, any gallery, independent gallery, any of the smaller organizations, especially that are really trying to keep themselves alive in this time, those are the places where you'll find the greatest innovation, I think. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but yeah, I would go knock on I don't know what your discipline is, but knock on the doors of any small theater company, volunteer, be on a board. That's where you'll kind of get really what's happening in the grassroots area.
I can also add, we've got a fantastic incubator at Concordia, District 3. Balsam by District 3 is the social impact incubator. There's quite a number of folks in the social impact and social economy space, Esplanade. Yes, Montreal actually does quite a lot of work with creatives. I think for me, the bridging between the creatives and business folks, I think there's a really big gap. And perhaps that's an opportunity that this conversation could spark. We do see a lot of creative entrepreneurs at District 3 in our incubator programs, but I would love to see more intentional matchmaking and kind of bridging between the arts and the business communities. So, yeah. Isaac and Mark, there's a project for you. Many projects we've suggested today, but there's another one.
Thank you for the wonderful session today. My question is around social enterprises. So for a for-profit social enterprise, it's very important to stay true to their unconventional value system, but they also have to appease the capitalistic structures around them to thrive in them. So how would you deal with the dichotomy?
I guess I'm happy to jump into this. Diane, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the questions that we're grappling with in my organization, is actually how to create a different kind of organizing structure that actually goes against the capitalist system, because we're working with indigenous ways of knowing, we're working with African ways of knowing. So how do we find the structures within those communities that can create a different language, again, around what success looks like? And how do we, yes, we always have to deal with the capitalist structure because it's not going to go away. But how do we create a space for ourselves that is rooted in integrity and speaks to the deep, deep, deep-seated values that we want to grow our business within, and then see how that vibrates against capitalism, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, right.
Sure, Undine, we'll do Megan and then.
Yeah, sure.
I would just add something to that in terms of looking at some examples. Earlier on in the conversation, I thought of an artist whose name is Theaster Gates. He's an American artist who was born in Chicago, lives in Chicago, actually. I'm not sure if he was born in Chicago, but he's really smart because he used the fact that he labeled himself as an artist early on, but he did things that were very sort of business minded. So he bought up a bunch of buildings in Chicago that they were selling for almost nothing because he labeled them as being sort of cultural, like an artist project. And then what he would do is he would fill these buildings with maybe an archive of music or a library. And he tried to make spaces that would be accessible to his community. And so he really was, he did a lot of, I mean, he continues to do a lot of really smart things. Like even he started a band called the Black Monks, and they sing primarily gospel music. And it was an artist project again. And he would go into museums, and it would be museums that were trying to engage the community and be more welcoming to community members. And he thought, well, we got to do things that those community members are going to respond to. So I'll go in with my Black Monks band and they'll come in to listen to the gospel music and maybe they'll look at some of the art around at the same time. So it was like a really smart, he's just a really interesting, smart person who has kind of always called himself an artist. I mean, he did pottery actually, like when he was first studying to be an artist. But he's always got these initiatives that are much more social, way more socially engaged, and sort of he's figured out a way to kind of be part of this system. I mean, he works with now one of the biggest mega galleries in the world. He's represented by Larry Gagosian. He's a superstar artist. So he's really been very successful, and he's part of this capitalist system. But he's always also figured out ways to do really important things within it. And I think those kinds of people are the people we need to look at to find ways to do the things that you're talking about, because it is possible. You know, it's just not clear sometimes. It's just not easy. You have to kind of really figure out ways to do it.
Great. Undine?
Yeah, I mean, this question comes up a lot, and it's really challenging. The first thing that we do when we work with entrepreneurs trying to innovate and live their values through the design of their organizations is to name that this tension exists and to grieve it, trying to bring about new ways of doing things within a structure that doesn't support new ways of doing things. There's a lot, it's painful, it's really difficult and challenging. It also leads to a lot of burnout for many entrepreneurs. So naming it is the kind of first step. And most social impact businesses have an advocacy kind of thread that needs to run through them around systems change, in addition to the things that they're doing, because collectively, all of us kind of working towards dismantling systems together is what perhaps may change these paradigms over time. And we all in impact-based businesses need to be part of that movement. So we talk a lot about that in impact businesses. And yes, I think this is where we need creatives to think about ways to navigate the current system that enables enough connection to your values and your vision to provide the energy, the enthusiasm, and the desire to want to bring these organizations into the world, despite the current systems that we exist within. So it's complex. It's not an easy answer, but it requires deep exploration, and it's going to require a lot of innovation as well. So my suggestion is to collaborate with artists who do think about these things, because it's those innovations that may just, shape a business model to exist in an incredible way within the systems.
Great. I think we're almost out of time, but I feel like we should get at least one question from online.
Well, actually, I was just popping in to say people online are crickets, being very quiet, although very grateful for the words that were shared here today and the ideas. And I do know that our organizers wanted to have some closing words. Yeah. I know there's a few hands raised, but folks, you're welcome to stick around for another half an hour and talk to the panelists if you're in the space. So maybe I'll pass it to Exad and Mark now, and give a round of applause to our panelists.
Well, thank you so much for your incredibly rich contributions to this discussion. You too, Undine. It's really been a privilege to sit and listen to the challenges that have been brought up and the really interesting ideas, all the creativity that's been going on between the five of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you again. I'm just I'm pumped. I'm sure most of you are the same, and I have learned a lot, and it was a very exciting discussion. And I'm a big believer in conversations, especially when we are talking about the big change and institutional changes. And this type of conversations, which I am sure is not the only one, is the first of many ones happening in a more institutionalized ways. Actually, it would be something that brings us really closer together on a bigger objective. Actually, even like me and Mark have been talking about this topic, the language wasn't the same. The way that we were working is not the same. So bringing people together is like, it's a kind of learning experience for all of us. And I think that's a good example, a small step of a largest journey that we can have ahead of us on bringing these two camps, which I still believe that are very close to each other, artists or entrepreneurs in heart. We look at the artists, how they are working. It's like exactly the way the entrepreneurs are working. So I am very happy that we had this conversation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, amazing panelists. Thank you, Adrian, for being an amazing moderator today. I didn't expect anything else other than that. So, and okay, there's a small token appreciation. I will give it to after. Undine, I will give it to you when I see you. That means we need to see you. Everyone. There is a small refreshment on the side and half an hour of a short and sweet networking session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. I'll just say a word of thanks to the folks on Zoom. We appreciate your presence in that space. Thanks for listening in and your comments there. We'll close up the Zoom now, but remind you that if you want to revisit this awesome panel, it's already available on Concordia University's Fourth Space YouTube page. That is a mouthful. All right, enjoy the rest of your evening. Until next time, thanks everyone.
And thanks, Anna, for a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Next time.